Hello, fellow translators. I'm not wearing my glasses. I was wondering why I couldn't see well. There. Hello, fellow translators. Today I want to talk to you about bilingual people and the difference between being bilingual and being a translator, because I feel like a lot of people say that they're bilingual and that makes them a good translator or etc. And I want to deal with this specifically toward freelance translators, people like us, just because there are certain traits and characteristics that make up a freelance translator and that bilingual people just don't have. And too often I hear, and even translators will say, oh no, bilingual people can't be translators because, what we do is a craft and they don't understand that. Because that's too vague, right? And a lot of bilingual people will be like, no, I speak both languages as well. And, I translated this thing for my friend. And so, I know what I'm doing. And bilingual people might know what they're doing. And, you never know. Or they could, they could easily maybe become translators, become freelance translators or not. It really depends. But these are some of the traits. Let's put it in a nicer way. Let's say if you're bilingual, these are some of the traits you'll need to become a freelance translator. And so let's start off with the freelance part right away. The freelance part means that you're working on your own. So you need to be entrepreneurial. You need to have that aspect to you. And so what does this mean? This means you need to be a self-motivator. You need to be able to push yourself without a boss breathing down your neck all the time. Get this done, get that done, get that done. You need to be someone who has the motivation to get it done themselves. You need to be your own boss breathing down your own neck, telling yourself to get it done. So you need to have the motivation. You need to be a doer as well. And a doer means that you actually ship, as Seth Godin says. You ship it out. You get stuff done and you're able to send it out. And this is important because a lot of people working for themselves, who want to work for themselves, really feel like they're not ready yet. Now is not the time. They procrastinate. They want to analyze this, prepare more for that, and be ready at this time and blah, blah, blah. And all of that, you can't have it because that's, trying to do that or trying to even be a perfectionist and make sure everything's perfect, that just means you're going to delay it and delay it forever. And so if you want to be a freelance translator, you need to be a doer. You need to be a self-motivator. You need to be a doer. And that means getting stuff done. It also means you're going to make mistakes, by the way. But you're going to learn from those mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. I've made plenty of mistakes. I still make mistakes. And but the good thing is, mistakes usually you don't make them twice because you remember when you make a mistake in in the real world, and it affects you. So yeah, so you need those entrepreneurial traits. The other thing a lot of people say is that to be an entrepreneur, you need to be a risk seeker. I don't really buy that. I think I went into freelance translation because I'm pretty risk averse. And the idea that I have to rely on my job on a boss and another company that being around and giving me jobs, to me, that seems more risky because then I only have one client, if you will. It'll be my company that I work for. And, if I mess up, they fire me. But if they mess up or go out of business or there's a downturn, then they fire me as well. I'm going to be fired. I'm going to be let go before my boss is or my boss's boss. And so I always feel like I don't have control if I'm working for some other company. But if I work on my own, I have the control. And if I get fired or if a client doesn't want to work with me, then it's all my fault. But at least there I can work on it and become better. And I have control over that. And to me, that seems a lot less risky than having other people control what I do and being, anyway, that's how I feel about risk. But definitely you need to have these entrepreneurial traits. Now let's get on to the translation traits themselves. And this is what a lot of bilinguals say that they're translators. And these are the reasons why they're not yet, or what they need to become translators. First of all, you need an excellent knowledge of your target language. And I said target language on purpose. Target language is a language you translate into. That needs to be the one you have excellent knowledge of. Usually what happens is that that's your native tongue. You grew up speaking that language or you were educated in that language and it's the language you know best. If you know two languages even fluently, there's one that's your native tongue. By the way, you don't need to know the source language fluently. And a lot of people who are not translators don't think this is right, and so you don't like saying that to clients necessarily or something. But that's why you find people who can translate from 1, 2, 3, 4 different languages into the target language. But that's the thing. You usually almost always translate into one target language because that's the language you speak excellently. and at least you write in. You have to be excellent at writing in that language because we're talking about written translations here. Interpreting is a whole different thing. We're talking about written here. And in fact, a lot of people I know who learned a new language like to show off that they mess up their native tongue because, it's like those people who go study abroad in Spain and when they come up, they mess up the pronunciation because of their study abroad or whatever. But a lot of people who speak two languages like to mess them up just to show, I don't know, because they think it's funnier to show that they speak two languages. You cannot have that. You need to speak your native tongue fluently. You need to write in your native tongue fluently and perfectly. And because you need to be able to convey everything you have to convey perfectly. Obviously, this will depend, and we'll talk a bit more later about specializations. This will depend on your specialization. If you're translating, say, literary fiction, then definitely absolutely needs to be perfect, and more so than if you're doing, say, financial statements, or and stuff like that, because there you just need to know the terms and you put them in there. But either way, regardless, you should be speaking your target language fluently, and you should have excellent knowledge of it. Usually that means that you've been educated and or grew up speaking that language, let's face it. Secondly, you need to be, and I touched on this a bit before, but it actually ties right into it. You need to be a good writer, and this ties into knowing the language extremely well. But I mentioned it again because I want to go a bit more. When I say literary fiction, you need to be a lot better at it than if you just do financial statements. It's kind of a progression. So if you translate literary fiction, or say you don't translate literary fiction, but you translate legal documents, you definitely need to have a very good knowledge of that language, of the target language. But if you're translating, say, database terms, then you just need to know the terms. And you need to know those terms, but that's pretty much it. And usually it's on a list on Excel or something along those lines. But regardless, you need to have good knowledge of the language and you need to be a good writer, especially if you're on the side of fiction or legal terms or marketing, localization, stuff like that. You need to be good at writing. And so a lot of translators, in fact, I've seen it when I hire a translator, if they've done writing, if they're a published author in their target language, to me that's excellent because it shows that they are good writers. They know how to express themselves. And expressing yourself is extremely important for translating because there might be a certain mood, a certain something in the source language, and you might not be sure how to convey it in the target language, but people who know how to write are able to do that. So you need to be good at writing, and that needs to be, not everyone is good at writing. You can be bilingual, but not very good at being an author or at writing essays or articles or something like that. But as a good translator, that's definitely a skill that you should have. So the next skill I think translators should have is that they need to be sort of paranoid. They need to have this obsession with details and precision and everything like that because they have to. Because when you go through the source text, you need to kind of go through with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that everything is exactly as it should be in the target text. And for me, this involves going through it at least twice, usually more times. So I go through it when I translate it, then I go through it again, and I've mentioned this before, I go through it again like the next day or at some point with fresh eyes and look over just the translated version and try to make sure that it sounds perfect and that it's conveying the exact same thing I got when I read the original. And so you really need to have this sort of paranoia, this OCD people will call it these days, but basically this obsession with detail and precision. And this, as a translator, at least from what I've seen, translators, people who do written translations really have this. And they'll take the time to make sure that everything is exactly the way it should be. And when they ship it back to the client, it is in perfect condition. The next point, finally, is that they need knowledge of a certain field. If you're translating legal translations, chances are you studied law, you worked as a paralegal, you have something to do with the law. If you do financial translations, you study business or finance or worked in finance or something like that. And you need to have this knowledge. And there again, when I hire translators, if they worked as a paralegal, to me that's excellent. Or maybe they worked as, they worked in banking or they studied business or something like that. And even though that has nothing to do with translation, that's very good. And a lot of people ask me, they say, I don't have anything I can put on my resume that's just translation based, or I don't have much. And I say, look, as long as if you have this business stuff or this legal stuff, then that's the specialization you should be shooting for, and that really helps. Include that in there. And that'll help out what little you do have in translation and help build on that, because you need to have knowledge of that field. You need to know what the terms are. And you need to know the difference between bylaws and articles of association if you're translating business documents, And not everyone who's bilingual necessarily has that. So you need to know what you're doing in that sense. And this is a lot with localization as well. When you're translating marketing materials, stuff along those lines, you need to have knowledge of it, because you can almost never translate something literally when it's marketing from one language to the other, because marketing and sales are so different in different places and in different languages. So yeah, those are just some of the reasons why bilingual people are not necessarily translators, and some of the things bilingual people can take into account if they want to become translators. I'm sure there might be others that I'm missing. Feel free to let me know if you know of any other traits that bilingual people should have in order to be translators, and why when someone says, someone who's bilingual says, I could translate that too, why maybe they couldn't, not yet, because I'd be curious to hear those. Anyway, hopefully you find these useful and informative, and don't forget to click thumbs up if you like this video, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you in the next video. Okay, thanks. Bye. Savidum.